And that's why we're asking how do people know that with the chair? Anybody who cares to listen, I've been telling them about the report. I spoke to Mr. Motshekga, who's the head of Arts and Culture, but more important, the head of Political Education in the ANC, and say, Minister, if you care to listen, here's a matter for your attention. I've raised it with Minister Dlamini, who's the head of Education and Health in the ruling party. So it's really generated lots of excitement, and all the people were just looking forward to this this report. So thank you very much for the report and the excitement that I think it has generated. And because I was saying to Mr. Motshekga, once you teach political education of the ANC, outside history and just contextualizing everything else, much more long about where we come from, you're going to really miss the meat and the essence, even of political education of the ANC. So it's been a very exciting exercise. And it has allayed my fears. I mean, I used to be a history teacher in my old days as a teacher. And when ANC kept on raising this question about teaching of history at all levels, and I was just worried about, I was saying to Doctor that I hope the ruling party doesn't want to NCify history, because history is not about, like, Zimbabwe's Zanu-fied history. And I was really worried to say, liberation history is very important, but it's not the sum total. There's much more beauty and wealth in history. And liberation movement is one key element, and I think the report and the work that you did has really allayed my fears, because I was saying to say, no, wait a little, let's hear what people say, what the world does, because I really was concerned about the ensification of history, the way I think Zimbabwe did with their history, because in that being they had a beautiful history. And I think as things were getting tough, I think with the EFFs coming, they just really felt the need to Zanufy. And I was saying, I hope we're not responding to our own challenges and then intensifying. But I think it's quite clear that we're not going that direction. We're really a matured nation. We're going to do things the right way. So I can tell you from the word go, I'm not, because we're going to go through a long, not a very long process, and that is not, because education is a concurrent function. After here, we're going to take the report to the CEM. As National Department, we have the prime responsibilities for curriculum changes, but or the management of curriculum and policy, but we also have to take our counterparts in the provinces on board. So there's going to be just that administrative process, but I can tell you what the biasness is, because even from the way the terms of reference was about the feasibility of teaching history up to grade 12. That's what, so we can see where the wind is going. The only thing we have to be very sure that, again, we really can compare, we are in line with what is happening and what other people are doing, but that's the direction, I think, option C, because that was a starting point, option C. You still have to go again to the ruling party, because this has been a resolution from conference to conference. The last conference in Nasrek was not the only resolution. It's a resolution that comes from Polokwane, it went to Mangaung, and it was reinforced at the last conference. So there's really been a yearning throughout time to make sure that we can address this issue, and especially the content issue that is there. So it is going to have to go also through that process, which helps for me, because for me it's a very exciting process, which allows us as South Africans to talk about ourselves as a nation in our own terms. Members of the media, Dr. Govender was saying it's the history of they were quoting the proverb of, it's of the hunter and the hunted. I said, but it's not that there, it's about us, about our past, about our future, about our nationhood, about our location in the world, it's much more than the hunter and the hunted, but it's really about us, our future, our identity, our nationhood, and our place in the world. So the incidence of the hunters will come on the way, but this one is much more bigger than the hunting and the hunted, but really it's about our identity as a nation, our nationhood, and everything else. So Program Director, I really want to convey our heartfelt gratitude, especially to people who took time to attend what we regard as a very important meeting for us. As I've just said, for me the report is really much more, it's about our nationhood. It is about us laying a solid foundation for our children, for their identity, social cohesion, and really our story across race, gender, over time, and mapping forward where we are going. It's not the first time that, I think, as a department, we've been engaging around history, but I think with time we are really maturing and getting much more deeper into the issues that we need to talk about. Because I think the tinkering was just managing a process. So I think the management is going to be well managed. We want to extend our sincere gratitude to the chairperson and members of the History Ministerial Task Team for the excellent work. And it's clear that the report is a labor of love from some of Africa's foremost historians, some of our greats in the country, you can see from the report. And we really want to say we're very excited about in receiving this report. It's been long waited, and I can tell you from, as I say, the public, the ruling party in particular, they really have been insisting on getting this matter dealt with. From different academia, from interest groups, and all people who are involved in the history education landscape. And I think it comes, as the Delukwati has said, at the tail end of the celebrations of the Africa Month. We did deliberately and consciously put it on this day of the Republican Day. We just thought for us, it's history. It should come in one of our key historical dates. And as I say, we're proud and excited to be joining our brothers and sisters across the continent and the diaspora in celebrating our African humanity. And as the African continent, despite the many challenges we face, nonetheless, we believe that we've made significant strides moving ourselves through struggle from colonialism to independence from imperial conquerors. Our rich history and heritage ties us together as Africans. More so, we now know that we have a common ancestry which was discovered right here in our country at the cradle of humankind. And our common ancestry points out to an important fact that Africa not only has a history, but a lengthy one that spans over more than 3 million years. At this point, Program Director, I want to repeat what we said during the 2015 First History Roundtable. I did say, I quote myself, do you quote yourself? Say, I normally used to acknowledge the source, but the source. I really want to emphasize that we're in no way attempting to rewrite history for the benefit of the ruling party. And I did say from 2015 that there's no attempt of rewriting history for the benefits of the ruling party. And this project is not a propaganda exercise destined to shore up and buttress support for the oldest liberation movement in Africa, the ANC. But it's a principled, as a principle, we are actually against the rewriting of history for the sole purpose of achieving short-term political expediency. In this regard, we want to declare that our intentions remain noble as we believe in the wise words of the Anglo-Irish political theorist and philosopher who put it succinctly a century ago when he said, I quote, "Those who don't know history are destined to repeat it and its mistakes." And I think when you read the report, there were very interesting findings from the team about, I don't want to get into stereotypes, what the poor or the lack of teaching of history in Nigeria, what are the likely consequences? And Dr. here, for instance, was saying the good teaching of history in Ghana explains certain things about Ghanaians themselves. So it just really shows the importance of teaching history. So all we're doing here is to reclaim our history as Africans. Historians rightly conclude that from a legacy perspective, we tell our stories for ourselves and as a gift to the future generations. And that's what we really think this exercise is. That is about us. It's not about the hunters and the hunted, it's about us. And more than anybody. And we believe that young Africans should be taught to develop a sense of pride in their heritage, which in turn will boost their self-esteem and confidence. Consequently, we will empower them to master their own destiny while simultaneously encouraging them to engage in the honest task of improving the lot of our continent. To this end, it is important to dispel the myth that has existed for decades that Africa as a troubled continent, renowned more for its wars and diseases than as a source of human progress. We need to emphasize that questions of heritage and identity are not as straightforward as they might first appear. Perhaps the first and the best place to begin addressing these topics is by acknowledging that in a continent like Africa, there is not one heritage or an easily delineated set of distinct identities. And again, I agree completely with Dr. when she said, and both of them, when they said questions of tribe, it's a construct that can be dispelled with ease because it is a construct that is foreign in our lives. So the cultures, languages, and heritage of Africa are multiple, diverse, and dynamic. Our young people must understand and appreciate this diversity, which is a cornerstone of African history. So program director, again, I don't want to go through what I've said in the budget speech, but I think what we're looking forward is to say what is going to happen from here. So as I say, the task team has helped us to increase the scope of international comparative study, which I'm very excited about. And I think in my reading had not even thought of looking at, I mean, I looked at out of, I think, personal interest in my current involvement in what happened to history in post-liberation countries, with Zimbabwe and other things, so Mozambique, and how, really, because as I say, my concern really has been around manipulating history for political purposes. And I was very excited when you really also brought the Ghanaian example and just show how rich history can be handled. And also the comparative work that has been done. And as I've just said, Chair, we want to thank you for the sacrifices and time you gave away from your families. It's been a very intense exercise, as you can see from the report. But also spell out that, as I say, in our next CEM, now that we've received it formally, it's going to be tabled for CEM, for noting, so that we can start processing it in the system. I was looking at the time frames because I think knowing the sector and all competing demands on it, perhaps we need to tweak a little the time frame so that we don't lose the momentum. Because that's likely my concern, without necessarily undermining due process. We have to carefully embed the process, make sure that the system is adequately prepared for the implementation of the recommendations, but in the meantime also be very careful about losing the momentum, I think, against competing demands. There's a huge issue that we are confronted with. Everybody wants to talk about the fourth industrial revolution. Everybody wants to talk about radical economic transformation. And it's very important for us to really make sure that once those debates happen, we stay on track in terms of the implementation and don't lose the momentum in the process. I've been saying my farewells to the department to say, at least if there's anything I want to leave behind, is the implementation starting in 2019. So to make sure that indeed we start rooting in the implementation of the process. As I say, we will be looking at the time frames carefully, examine them in a way that we can see if we can bring them forward, use some of our experiences that we have used when we were implementing the CAPs, the good and the bad experiences that we had when we were fast-tracking the implementation of CAP, where we did shortcuts and what were the consequences, but also make sure that indeed we continue the work and there's proper communication. So I really wanted to really end it up there, and thank you again for the work. We'll be calling upon you. As I say, this is one of the biggest things that we've had as a ruling party in the past, for instance, 10 years when I've been minister. So I think for me, it's one of the biggest gifts that our academics have given to us, both as a ruling party but as a government, in terms of national concerns about the content of history in our curriculum. It's been a major concern, and I think this one begins to help us. Dr. is quite correct that when the fees must fall came and really raised concern about the Africanization of the curriculum, we're already on the task to say we have to really relook at the things that we're telling our kids about themselves, about their country, about actually the whole African content. So it was quite a brilliant or a very good coincidence. So Doctor, let me also take this opportunity. Dr. Govender, this is his last assignment with us today. He's leaving the department from today. This is his last day in the department. And he's really served well. He's left us great legacies, and it was quite sad when he came to say farewells to me, and he assured me that he's leaving the department, not the sector. So we'll still be able to benefit from his skills. But I thought I should take this opportunity to thank Doctor for a great job. We poached him from Eastern Cape when we were doing provincial visits. Sometimes MECs think that we are visiting, but we're also identifying talent. So we poached him, and he's now going back to the Eastern Cape to rejoin his family. So I want to say thank you very much, Doctor, and all of the best, because indeed today is his last day practically as a member of the department. Thank you very much, Dr. Coven.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.